Hey guys, how's it going? Alex Brinkman here with the Divi Creators Club, and I wanted to show you the all-new Divi Weather 2.0 plugin. First of all, big thanks to everybody who used and supported Divi Weather 1.0. All of your feedback and everything is what helped me to kind of steer the direction of Divi Weather 2.0. It's got a ton of cool new improvements. One of the big ones is being able to show the weather forecast using the Open Weather Map API. So let's go ahead and dive into a couple examples here, and I'll show you the plugin. Right now, here are two different modules. One is showing the current weather, one is showing the forecasted weather, but you could put them together into one module if you wanted. I'm just doing two here as an example of things that you can do. So let's go ahead and open it up. You'll notice that the first option is your units. Do you want to use imperial or metric? Totally up to you, based on your region. The location tab, originally in Divi Weather 1.0, you could only use a location name. In 2.0, I've added a couple different options. So you can do the location name, you can do the city ID, or you can do the zip or postal code and your country code. And so for city ID, if you choose city ID, there is a link here where you can find your city ID based on the Open Weather Map city IDs. If you use the zip code or postal code and country code, you can search that way as well. And this is helpful because a lot of larger cities will have multiple weather stations at different parts of their city. So big cities like New York or London and Paris and all those, they probably have multiple weather stations throughout the city. So this will help you kind of fine tune where you want to get specific weather for. And also, the Open Weather Map expects the location name in a very specific way. And so sometimes people were running into issues where they couldn't find the city they were looking for because they had spelled things maybe a little bit different or typed it in different than what the Open Weather Map was looking for, and it led to a little bit of confusion. So I added just a couple different ways to find the weather. So let's jump into components here. Show current weather. The two big options are show current weather and show forecasted weather. And when current weather is enabled, you'll see that we've got some options here. So current temperature, our minimum and maximum temperature, our wind speed direction, which is down here in the lower left, humidity, and pressure. These boxes, this plugin was built using the Flex CSS Flexbox. So when I get rid of pressure, you'll see humidity slid over. There's two boxes. Humidity kind of looks weird hanging out here, but that's because humidity is center aligned, and I'll show you that in the design tab in a minute. If I got rid of this, I could right align humidity and just tuck it over here in this corner, and we would be fine. It wouldn't look weird kind of hanging out here. So you do have, in the design tab especially, a lot of control over what your weather module looks like and kind of where things are positioned. I'll come up back to forecasted weather in just a second. So the weather descriptions are these guys underneath the icon. You can turn them on or off. And if they're on, you've got the option of language. Right now, the plugin supports 33 different languages. The translations are for this weather description, and they're provided by the Open Weather Map API. It's not something that the plugin actually does or has any control over. It's data that's returned to us from the API. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that I've got an option for Beijing. You'll see that there's a description here, and I believe this is simplified Chinese I chose for that. So let's go ahead and scroll back up, and then show weather icons. You can turn these on or off as well. So if I enable the forecasted weather, you'll see that we've got forecast down here and number of days to forecast. You can forecast up to 5 days out the weather. Totally up to you. And this looks kind of ugly right now. This is the default styling for this. You have a lot of control over how these are aligned, the fonts that you're using, the font weight, the color, same for the icons. Same for the temperature, and I'll go over that a little bit more in depth here in the design tab. And actually, we'll jump over there now, and I'll show you some of this stuff. So for the current weather, you've got the icon color. You can make the icon color whatever color you want, which is just this current one. These forecasted icons are controlled under forecasted weather, and I can choose the icon font size for these if I want to play around. In the list view, it's not that big of a deal for the icon font size because you're probably going to try to match it up where it looks good with the other text. But in the grid view, that's when you can kind of do some cool things with the icon font size. And I'll show you that in a minute as well. Primary or your current weather icon font size. And then show labels. That's these guys here, pressure, humidity, and wind. You can turn them on or off. Totally up to you. In the forecasted weather, you have the option to choose how the data is formatted. By default, it uses whatever you enter on your Divi settings page, your main Divi settings page, but you can change this. But you'll notice if I change it, nothing has changed here yet. And the same goes when you first add a weather module. So let me go ahead and click check mark on that, and then let's go down here and we'll add a new weather module. When you first make it or add a weather module, and also when you start making changes like that, it's not going to change right away, and you'll get this little placeholder the first time that you add one. And the reason this happens is because since the plugin relies on data from an API, in order to prevent your website from just making a ton of crazy API requests every time you change something, it will only fetch the weather data when the page loads. And then what happens is when it grabs that data, it will cache it on your website. And so that way, even on every page load, it's not fetching new data. It's only doing it when either the cache has expired or there is no data for what you want to show. Then it will go grab it. And you have total control over what that cache looks like. By default, it caches the data for 30 minutes at a time. But you could set that to any amount that you want, whatever makes most sense for your website. I would say, I think the minimum I set it to is 5 minutes. So by default, it will cache it in, at the lowest level, 5-minute increments. But you can change that to be kind of whatever you want. So when you first create one, you'll come in here and you'll choose your location name, like maybe Miami, US, whatever. But you'll notice there's still no weather here. And I'll go ahead and just save this. And we'll refresh the page. And you'll see now that we've got the basic options here for Miami. There's a few clouds here today. And if I open the components, I can start checking these. And it'll start populating the weather data, same with the forecast. So it's all there. You just have to kind of choose, what you want. So it's a nice day in Miami today. Let me go ahead and get rid of this guy, and we'll get back to what we were doing here. But you'll notice now that I saved it and reloaded it. For forecasted weather, I set it to a lowercase l, which is just the day of the week. So now I'm just showing the day of the week instead of the full date that we had before. So totally up to you. And again, here's where you can change your forecasted icon colors, size, forecasted background. So by default, there are kind of two main sections to the plugin. You have your current weather, which is its own block, and then the forecasted weather is its own block. And so you can set a background to this. And the reason that I did that is because now you can kind of create some pretty cool, like Google Material weather card style modules if you wanted to. Maybe a nice drop shadow here. We could add some padding into this and really kind of clean this up if we wanted. Put our icon back to a color we can see here. So you can do a lot of stuff with it if you wanted to. And you could even fade that if you wanted, like this background here, if you didn't want a perfect white and you wanted something to show, which is helpful if you've got a background that's an image. We can make this slightly transparent so a background image is showing through. Whatever you want to do. So we'll go ahead and hop over into layout. So now in layout, when you have current weather selected, you'll have this option. And if you have forecasted weather selected, you'll have the layout for the forecast. And so your current weather has two options. You've got compact and you've got stacked. So this is compact, and stacked, they're just on top of each other. Now you'll notice that my temperature is over here now, which doesn't look as good. It doesn't look bad actually, but if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see that you have options for the current description text, current temperature, minute and max. If I click this, you'll see that we're right aligned and we're in the current temperature. That's this guy, and he is right aligned. If I center align him, he'll be underneath it, left align. So you have a lot of flexibility with how this is controlled. You can change your fonts just for this temperature. Right now it's ultra bold. We could do light. And I won't go into all these because they're all just the normal font or text options that you're used to in the Divi Builder. But you'll see that you've got them for everything. So for the forecast date itself, for the description. So for the date, maybe we want to go, I'll leave the font the same. But for the weight, maybe we do a semi-bold, uppercase, shrink it down a little bit. And then for our description text, maybe that one we make light and we shrink them down a little bit more. You know, you can play around with the line height, whatever you want to do here. But you have a lot of control over that. If you wanted to add some spacing in here, this brings me to the next point. There is, for CSS, if you're handy with CSS and you want to get more, let me go ahead and switch this back just because I like the compact layout better. You've got your normal CSS boxes here, before, main, and after. But I've also added direct CSS access to pretty much every element this uses. So current weather, which is this top current weather block, you know, right now it's got a padding of 20 up top, 5% on the sides, and 0 on the bottom. But I could do 50 up top. You know, you can write whatever CSS here that you want if you want to do something that's more complex than what the Divi builder gives you access to by default. The current weather before and after element, which I'll show you a little bit more because I use that to display the like London up here. That's what I use to display the location name. Beijing here on the side. Seattle extended forecast down the side of our forecast here for Seattle. I use these pseudo elements, and I'll show you exactly what I did to achieve that. And then you can take it and run with it and get creative. The additional data group, that's these guys right down here. Right now they've got a padding top of 30 just to give it a little space in here, but you know, we could do 50 just to get a little bit more. Forecast list, that's these guys. You know, I could write something like opacity 0.25 and the whole thing, you know, gets that opacity. So you can do whatever you like there. It's got a before and after for this bottom section. The individual items itself, so I could say border bottom, one pick, solid, and put like maybe a light border here at the bottom of these. Totally up to you. You got access to the date itself, the weather description, the icon, and the temperature. So again, full direct CSS access to get as creative as you want with your CSS to style these beyond whatever the builder normally lets you do. I'm going to jump back to the design tab real quick and show you the layout for the forecast, because you can also do grid if you want to do a grid. And if you do grid, you've got the option of columns here. So right now it's in 3 columns. If I change the forecast days in components to 5, right now you'll see it's still in 3 column grids, but I could come back here to the layout and say, you know, let's do 5 columns. That way I can stack them all up. And then of course I'd have to do some padding, and maybe a half column here isn't enough room to show all 5 depending on, you know, how we have this stuff styled. So you can kind of do whatever. I'm going to X that out so I don't save it. And actually I'm going to put it back to how I had it. I'll go ahead and save it real quick so anybody visiting our example page doesn't see a lot of craziness. And then I'll just show you, here's some quick examples of it. And what I've done here is I've just, so you can see what location I'm doing, I've just put a text block with the location there. You could put a text module underneath here and style it however you want if you wanted to show the location. If you want to do something like what I've done here for the London, UK, that's just, you'll see in my before pseudo element here, I've just put in content London, UK, and then did some styling to get it here. Same with the NYC. And I did the same for Beijing, custom CSS. You'll see that I've got it here. And then the Seattle extended forecast is a little bit different. For this one, I put it into the forecast pseudo element because this is a forecast box here, because I am showing the forecast. So if I try to put something into the current weather, it won't work because there is no current weather block because the current weather's not showing. So you just kind of have to think about it. I mean, I could have just used the standard before and after because it applies to the element as a whole, but totally up to you. You can get super creative with what you've got going on. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any suggestions or ideas, I would love to hear them. I'm always trying to make my plugin better, and your kind of real world examples and real world suggestions is what makes that possible. So definitely let me know. All right, cool. Thanks, guys, and happy designing.